Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Global Awareness Report. My name is Lukachu32 and today we are going to be discussing news across the world and the war in Ukraine. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting off with Kherson. The Ukrainians have launched probably the biggest offensive of the war, on the Ukrainian side at least, in this region. It started on August the 28th and is continuing on. They have mechanized forces, motorized forces, some of their most elite units in this region, units that were trained by none other than the British SAS, Special Forces of the British Army. And they have captured so far in the 4 days around 4 villages. Tenyarov Podi, right down here. And they have also established and secured the bridgehead around Andrivka and Lotsove. We've talked about this before in previous episodes, where before this offensive began, Ukraine captured this area across the river here and have captured these small towns and villages down here and have made it offensive towards Brukanske down here, which is a major road. You can see the gray right here from the dam, from the river crossing up towards the front lines. And they have also captured Arkhangelsk, I believe. And there's also fighting towards and around the city of Vyaskopolia. And I believe they might have even captured this northern part of this village right here, although I'm unable to confirm that. But this northern part here might even be under Ukrainian control. And there's been fighting all across the front line, but this is the major breakthrough in this area, and we will see if the Ukrainians are able to successfully exploit this bridgehead across the river. And I believe that there might be some Russian forces still inside the forests here. I don't think these forests have been completely cleared out, but we will have to see if the Russians are able to push them back to the original positions, or maybe even they'll be able to push them back across the river. Or maybe the Ukrainians will be able to take Brukyanske and cut the road off, and cut one of the major roads off from this area. Down here, the town of Oleskanstrivka, I believe, I have forgotten to mark it, but the Ukrainians have claimed control over this town, but Russian sources say that the Ukrainians are stuck at this river right here. They're stuck at this bridge crossing and have not made it into the town. I will wait for further details and further confirmation before making a choice as to who controls the town, but I think in all likelihood the Russians are still in control of this town. It seems like too big of a town to fall in just 4 days. It seems to me that the Russians would probably have held on for a little bit longer, so it seems unlikely to me that the town has fallen, although I could be wrong. And obviously we will soon find out who is in control of the town, but I will for now leave it under the control of Russian forces. On August 22nd. Was this in the last report? I believe... Yeah, I believe it might have been, but this town is under Russian control. Baladenitne is under Russian control still. The Ukrainians have not captured the town in the offensive here. And yes, I believe that is all the towns that have been captured so far that have been confirmed. 4, maybe 5 if you believe the Ukrainians have captured this town. That is 5 villages so far captured in the Kherson offensive. If I may be allowed to give my personal opinion, I don't see this offensive bringing much fruit to the Ukrainian side. I don't believe that the Ukrainian army has enough trained troops that have offensive capabilities that could retake much land. I mean, the stuff that they have captured has been very small villages, and this was quite a big town right up here that has been captured. But again, that is one fairly major town, decently sized town. And it's been 4 days. The Ukrainians are going to run out of steam at this rate, and the Russians will be able to counterattack if they so choose. But I think one of the biggest problems is that these towns are so vulnerable to artillery, which the Russians have in great numerical advantage in artillery. So if you just look at the map here, this is not a very defendable position. The Russians could easily bombard it with artillery, and you have open fields. This whole area is just open fields. Perfect for tanks and artillery, which the Russians have the advantage in this war. So I don't think much will come of this attack, although we will have to see. Moving over here to Endahar, Ukrainian special forces have actually landed at Endahar, and I believe, according to the Russians, they were destroyed, as to quote the Russians. They were defeated, and on September 1st, about 6 a.m. Moscow time, Ukrainian troops with 2 sabotage groups of up to 60 soldiers and 7 boats landed on the coast of the reservoir around here, 3 kilometers northeast of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and attempted to seize the power plant. This is according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, so take it as you will. Also, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, there was another landing near Vohodahne, down here. But the barges used in the landing were sunk, at least 2 of them, and so I don't think any forces actually landed. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, I don't believe the Ukrainian sources of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense have commented or reported on this situation so far. So all we have is the Russian side of the story. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of this landing is to be, because it's not big enough to be a distraction for the offensive. I don't think any Russian forces were diverted, because it's not a large enough force to divert any forces. And I'm not sure what's the point in sabotaging or capturing a nuclear power plant is, so I have no idea why the Ukrainians would do this if this even happened at all. Although I think it's very unlikely that the Russian Ministry of Defense would just completely make up a story like this. I find that very unlikely, so I think it is most likely that this did happen, but I cannot for the life of me understand why. Although maybe it is completely fake, although I highly doubt that. And so I've actually forgot to mention what dates the towns were taken. On August 31st, this town was taken. 28th was when this town was taken, and the 31st again was when this town was taken, and this town was captured also on the 31st. So, yeah, so in the past 4 days, these towns have been captured by Ukrainian forces. Moving on the 23rd, Dorozayanska is actually still under Ukrainian control. It's a small village south of Mariupol, and I marked it as Russian control, but it is actually still under Ukrainian control. It's a small village, but I just thought it was worth noting that this is under Ukrainian control. So the front line has been pushed back actually quite significantly. I believe the front line was around here, just south of the town, but I was actually down here the whole time, it would appear. I believe I actually reported on this in the last episode. I forgot to delete this marker, but this is under Ukrainian control. That's on August 14th. Wow, how did I forget to delete that one? I don't know. But anyways, here, I know that all of this is new. So on August the 6th, the Russians captured this town after capturing the power plant. And then on the 8th, they went and captured Haladozov. So these two towns were taken. And then on the 19th, Zaitsev was captured by Russian forces, so this area right around here. And then on the 22nd, Dacha was also captured by Russian forces, this very small village right here, which actually has a trench right here. Although it's very small, so that's probably why I didn't mark it, was because it was too small to be really anything of note. And so this town is under Russian control now. And now Kodyma, which we talked about in the last episode, how Kodyma and Zaitsev are critical for the defense of Bakhmut, and that the Ukrainians need to hold on to this line in order to defend Bakhmut properly from any southward direction. Speaking of Bakhmut and Soledar, I think there hasn't been any changes to the front line. There's just been continual fighting. Both sides' armies' attention is focused on Kherson right now, so moving on to, yes, I'm fairly certain I've already reported on that, so I'm going to have to delete a few of these markers after the recording is over. But that looks to be it for the updates in Ukraine. A landing near Endahar, and one of the biggest offensives of the war so far around Kherson, which appears to be slowing down from what I can tell, although I could be wrong. I have actually heard rumors that this might be a feint and the real attack could be around Kharkiv to try and take this northern half west of the river back. Although I doubt it, I haven't seen Ukraine move much forces up here. No sources have reported that any major forces have moved up from anywhere across the front to around Kharkiv, so I believe that this is their actual offensive down here in Kherson. So if I if I may be allowed to give my opinion. Again, I'm not a military expert of the sort, but or anything of the sort, but it would appear to me that, like I've said countless times before, Ukraine simply does not have offensive capabilities. They don't have a trained enough army. They don't have enough resources, such as armored cars and tanks and air power and trained soldiers to conduct a successful offensive operation. Meanwhile, on the Russian side, they are able to use their artillery advantage and their air power advantage. Though they do not have air supremacy over Ukraine, they do have air superiority, but they're not constantly running flights and bombardments. But Ukraine has a hard time launching airstrikes. Russia has a less of a hard time. So Russia's able to use these advantages as well as its advantage in tanks and better trained infantry. From what I can gather, Russian infantry is better trained and is simply better than Ukrainian infantry, and is able to slowly push and to slowly capture territory, although I have to emphasize the slowness of the Russian invasion. It is a long, drawn-out World War I-like conflict, although with not as many trenches. But Ukraine doesn't appear to be able to have any kind of offensive capabilities within them, and I don't think that they ever will. I don't think the Ukrainian army is going to be capable of creating a offensively capable combat formation in a large enough scale that it can take back significant territory. So that is it for Ukraine war. Let's go over some headlines. First, let's move over to Moscow, where Ravel Maganov, who is the Lukoil chairman of Russia's oil giant Lukoil, has died after falling from a hospital window in Moscow. The company said that he died due to a severe illness. However, TASS, which is a Russian state-affiliated news network, the Russian government, I believe, owns them either fully or in part, said that he jumped out of a window and allegedly committed suicide here. However, according to this BBC article, several other people in the oil industry have passed away in suspicious manners, such as Sergei Protosnenya, who found alongside with his wife and daughter at a Spanish villa in April, a former vice president of Gazprombank, and Avdyev was found dead with his wife and daughter in their Moscow flat. A former Lukoil tycoon, Alexander Subotin, died of heart failure, reportedly after sneaking an alternative treatment from a Shadman. I'm not entirely sure what that is. Lukoil is Russia's biggest private company. In its statement, it said that it was down to Magnov's managerial talent that had evolved one of the world's biggest energy firms. So, obviously, there are many, many people in the West who are think that Putin assassinates his political rivals, and I'm not saying that he does or doesn't. If you want my personal opinion, I would say that if the American government assassinates people, then the Russian government certainly does. It's not uncommon for people the government doesn't like to be assassinated. Whether it be America, United Kingdom, Germany, China, Saudi Arabia has done it, allegedly. There have been allegations of most major governments doing this kind of thing, so in my personal opinion, I don't find the idea to be unlikely at all, although there is no way to confirm it. So we are going to move on to energy news. Gazprom has announced, this was on the 1st of September. No, this was on the 2nd of September this article was published. I forgot to put it on here, but this was just today. Gazprom will not reopen Nord Stream due to unexpected technical issues. The pipeline was due to reopen on Saturday after maintenance, but in a last-minute statement late on Friday, the company said that a technical issue had been found and the pipe cannot operate again until it's fixed. The European Union says Gazprom was acting on false pretenses. It's a massive blow to Europe, which is scrambling to cut its dependency on Russian gas before winter, and has been waiting for Moscow's next step in the energy war. So this comes as the G7 agrees to put a price cap on Russian oil. So members of the G7 have agreed to impose a price cap on Russian oil in a bid to hit Moscow's ability to finance the war in Ukraine. Finance ministers said that the cap on crude oil and petroleum products would also help reduce global energy prices. According to them, it would do that. The cap will be set at a level based on a range of technical inputs. As the article states right here, the devil will be in the details, and the details is something we do not have. So they have agreed to put a cap on Russian oil prices, but we don't know what the cap will be, and we don't know what that would look like. The G7 members have agreed to impose the cap, so they're not going to buy Russian oil at a certain price, at anything higher than a certain price. They've agreed to do that, but we don't know what that cap is. So the West is accusing Russia of shutting down this pipeline in response to the oil cap agreement. Although we will have to see. If in the coming days they reopen the gas pipeline, then obviously those fears were those fears will be put to rest. But if they don't, and this pipeline will be shut down indefinitely, and it doesn't reopen within the next weeks or so, then Russia may have, at least for now, shut down Nord Stream 1 for a very long period of time, and it might not ever reopen after this. We don't know. It is a possibility that we have to keep in mind, that Nord Stream might not reopen after this. So, and Europe cannot get enough energy for the winter. It needs Russian gas for now. I don't know how this crisis will be resolved, although I do know that Russia is in a better position than I think a lot of people do not understand that Russia is in a better position than what the media and what a lot of other people would have you believe, in my opinion. They're not in a fantastic position or even a good position. I don't think Russia is in a good position, but I think that they are in a decent position. I think the position they are in geopolitically is not as bad as a lot of Western analysts make it out to be, but it certainly isn't good. Europe's position is also not good as well. So, the continent of Europe is going through quite the struggle at the moment, and we'll have to see what comes of this in the coming months. It is close to autumn. It's September. It's going to start to get a lot colder, and people need to warm their houses. So, we will have to see. We are going to wrap it up here soon with news from Tehran. Iran has dropped some demands for the nuclear deal, U.S. official says. Iran has dropped some of its main demands on resurrecting a deal to rein in Tehran's nuclear program, including its insistence that international inspectors close some probes of its atomic program, bringing the possibility of an agreement closer, a senior U.S. official told Reuters on Monday. This article was posted on the 28th. The United States aims to respond as soon as a draft agreement proposed by the European Union that would bring back the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran that former President Donald Trump abandoned and current President Joe Biden has sought to revive. So, progress is being made to revise and resurrect the Iran nuclear deal. And it seems, and it would appear that it may very well happen. The likelihood of it happening seems quite high now, because a lot of the major demands are being dropped on both sides. There was a news article that the European Union has dropped some demands, and that the United States has... I think the United States has also dropped some demands, and that Iran is also dropping some of its demands. So it looks like the deal will come to a head. Whether this is a good or bad thing, I do not know. I'm not informed enough about this issue to give my opinion on it, but it looks to me that the chances of another Iran deal coming to fruition seems rather high. And lastly, President Joe Biden is to host a Pacific Summit, obviously with a wary eye on China. This is from the Stars and Stripes, which is a publication ran by the Department of Defense. The White House has announced on Friday that President Joe Biden will host Pacific Island leaders in Washington later this month amid growing worries of the United States and Western allies about China's activity in the region. Press Secretary Karen Jean-Pierre said in a statement, "The meetings of September 28th and 29th will demonstrate that the United States' deep enduring partnership with the Pacific Island countries in the Pacific region. Biden has invited Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, Palau, Nauru, Kiribati, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Samoa, Tuvalu, Tonga, and Fiji to take part in the summit, according to the White House." The announcement comes days after the Solomon Islands earlier this week asked countries to not send naval vessels to the South Pacific nation until approval processes are overhauled. Amid concerns over a new security pact between the Solomons and China, the government made the request after the U.S. Coast Guard... Okay, well, I'm not going to read the whole article here. You can read the article yourself. But well, the United States is trying to keep the Pacific Island nations, on its side, because obviously China is expanding its influence in the Pacific with its, lucrative investment deals and its tempting investment deals and security pacts. So the United States is trying to keep these vital islands that it needs within its sphere of influence on its side to make sure China doesn't gain a foothold into the greater Pacific region. The United States wants to keep the Chinese Navy from it wants to prevent the Chinese Navy from being able to cross the first island chain, which spans from Tsushima and Jeju in Korea and Tsushima in Japan, all the way down through the Philippines, and through Borneo. It wants to make sure that the Chinese Navy cannot breach out of that and cannot establish a base anywhere in the Pacific. So, the United States is continuing to focus more and more on China, obviously. And I think that is going to do it for this episode of the Global Awareness Report. I think I limited it to 30 minutes. I think we did pretty good on keeping it relatively short. Shorter than that one episode that was almost 50 minutes long. My apologies for that. But anyways, thank you for watching. And please like, comment, subscribe, and share. It really helps out. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.